Okay, this is going to be a video about the existence of God. Many theists hold that God exists, but before we can make such a determination, we must first agree on what definition of God we will use. In my reply to Praetor Drew, I think that's how it's supposed to be pronounced, I use the following definition. 1. God exists. 2. Free will exists. 3. God is omnipotent. 4. God is omniscient. 5. God is omnipresent. 6. God is omnibenevolent. 7. God is the creator of everything except himself. God is self-existent. 8. God is the only God existing. Before we dig into this definition and compare it to logic and reason, let me state my own philosophical view. I am a positivist, so I guide myself by 5 principles. 6 principles, actually. The scientific method, logic is universal. The goal of science is to explain and predict. The logic of confirmation. All knowledge is testable, so sheer belief is out of the question. Science does not equal common sense. Just because a lot of people think that, for example, eating before going swimming decreases safety, it doesn't make it so. Science must produce knowledge regardless of politics, morals, and values. Statements must be true for all times and all places. Okay, so from my positivist approach, I will now attempt to refute the existence of the God as defined by my earlier mentioned definition. First, let's have a look at the definition itself and how it's a rational definition for God. Obviously, God must be defined as existing for this definition on what God is. Free will exists means that all sentient beings can make decisions for themselves and that they are not programmed to make a specific decision or take a specific course of action. This definition grants God free will as well, so it's rational to apply this feature to God. God is omnipotent. Not all theists accept that God is omnipotent. Many of these hold that God acts with a persuasion rather than coercion, and that God, by having created sentient beings with free will, has given up some of his powers. The implication for this is of course that God can only intervene in this world through sentient beings, whom he might persuade to do good. Therefore the feature of omnipotence might be necessary when considering God. When it comes to omniscience, there are actually 2 possibilities. Either God knows everything, or God has the ability to know everything that it is possible to know without necessarily exercising this power to its full extent. Like with omnipotence, God might have chosen to limit his knowledge by choosing not to know something. God is omnipresent. It can be heavily debated what omnipresence actually entails, and I don't think this debate is necessary when considering the existence of God. In this definition, I shall limit omnipresence to mean present in all of morality. Thusly, God is the reason for all morality, and that there is an objective morality. If God exists, and God has a moral law, according to my positive approach, this moral law must be the same for all time and all places. God is omnibenevolent. According to the above point, God is the origin of morality, and if God is to be consistent, he must exhibit his own morality. And since this morality must be the same in all time and places, God must be all good, or omnibenevolent. God is the first cause, the uncaused effect, and thusly God must be the creator of all things. Also, if God is omnipotent, even with the power to limit his power, God must have created everything, because he wouldn't have power over something he didn't cause. God must be the only entity, as you cannot have 2 or more beings that are omnipotent. In polytheistic traditions with many gods, these gods are never omnipotent, and since we are considering a monotheistic God, this God is omnipotent. Now let's consider these qualities of God and see if they are logically consistent. Let's start with the famous problem of evil. The problem of evil states that since pain and suffering exists, an omnibenevolent, omnipotent and omniscient being cannot exist, because the being would then by definition have knowledge of how all suffering and pain occur. The being would by definition have the power to prevent all suffering and pain, and the being would have to do so because doing so is considered a morally good act, and the being is defined as omnibenevolent. Here we have a logical contradiction. Some theists claim that the cause of pain and suffering is man's free will. This statement, however, is false, because many natural disasters and diseases cause great deal of pain and suffering, and it can be scientifically shown that these natural disasters and diseases cannot be caused by man, so they must be caused by God, since God is the first cause and God is omnipotent. The argument from free will is not logically consistent. Other theists state that pain and suffering is caused by the original sin. However, the world has fallen from God's grace. However, this would mean that all humans are being punished by the actions of their ancestors. This is not justice according to the morality that is supposedly originating from God. So the logical result from this argument is that God is omnibenevolent and pain and suffering exists, and that is a contradiction. The next argument we will consider is mankind's limited knowledge. According to this argument, all pain and suffering cannot be used as an argument because it might be part of God's greater plan, which we are not capable of knowing or understanding. The logical consequence hereof is that the morality given to man from God describes God's good plan as evil, a contradiction. Another argument is that evil is complementary to good, that one cannot exist without the other. The logical conclusion from this argument must be that the sum of all things is zero and neutral, and God exists and is omnipotent and omnibenevolent. That is a contradiction. This argument gives an explanation to why evil exists, but it doesn't even begin to provide an argument for the existence of God. And it doesn't give an explanation to the problem of evil.